Hello class, and welcome to lesson 5.4, trinomial factoring with decomposition. So today we're learning the hardest factoring method, and the next method we'll learn the next lesson will be the easiest one. So please stay with me today, and tomorrow's lesson you'll find easier, but today's going to be a tricky one. And I want to pay attention. I know last lesson I asked you to make sure you did your trinomial factoring homework. I again want you to make sure you take a serious effort into doing this homework as well, as these are both important factors that we add on to in grade 11 math. Alright, but before we get to doing the hard type of factoring called decomposition, let's take a look at our warm-ups for today. Number one, given ax squared plus bx plus c, which is standard form of the quadratic, identify the a, b, and c below. So for a, first question, a equals 1, b equals 9, and c equals 20. Okay, so they follow a, b, and c. All right. Second question, taking a look. A equals 8, b equals negative 13, and c equals 30. All right. The third one, be careful with this one, folks. It is not in standard form order. So you got to put the x squared first. So it's going to be negative 5s squared plus 10s plus 3. Now that we've got it in that order, we can now say a equals negative 5, b equals 10, positive 10, and c equals 3. All right. Last question. It's a little harder. We don't have it in standard form at all. Actually, it's in factored form. So we need to expand by doing FOIL. So first, it's going to be 3b. Outside is going to be minus 36. Inside is going to be plus b squared. And last is going to be minus 12b. Okay? We're going to collect like terms and put it, sorry, that's an equal sign there, and put it in standard form. So bring our b squared term first, collect our b terms, so you're going to have negative 9b or minus 9b, and your constant term last. Based on that, now you can tell me that a equals 1, b equals negative 9, and c equals negative 36. Awesome! All right, it says factor the following, and always remember, folks, when we factor, we always want to common factor first if possible. Remember that for your upcoming quiz and upcoming test. All right, so make sure to common factor first, ladies and gentlemen. So what do we have available here? We can take a 4 out and a t. So we're left with t minus 4. Okay, look in the bracket. Can we do any further for factoring? No. So we move to the next question. B, taking a look at this, can we common factor out? The hint here, folks, is a equals 1, and it's in standard form. So there's nothing we can common factor out, and it's a trinomial, so it's going to be the product and sum method that we're going to use, which is trinomial factoring. Because a equals 1, it's easy to go product equals c, which is 20. The sum equals b, which is 9. And then you've got to figure out, hey, what are all my products at 20? So negative 1 times 20, 2 times 10, 4 times 5, okay? And which one of them sums to 9? And is this factor? And then when you set up your two brackets, you take the square root of the first and the sign of your factors that you collected. Okay? Awesome! Taking a look, folks, at C. Okay, look to common factor first. Again, a equals 1. That's a little easier. So we are going to do what's called simple trinomial factoring. Today, folks, we're going to explore what happens when a is not 1. So things are going to be a little different. It's called decomposition, so we'll get to that. Okay, so our product equals 12, and our sum equals negative 8. All right, so because the sum is negative, that means at least one must be negative, but if the product is positive, that means we both have negative values. So a negative and a negative, because a negative times a negative gives you a positive. All right, so I'm going to go negative 1 times negative 12, Negative 2 times negative 6. Oopsie, that's a 6. Let me erase that and put that in there. Okay. And negative 3 times negative 4. So all of those have a product of 12. However, which one will sum negative 6? And it's the negative 2 times negative 6. So you set up your brackets, folks. Take the square root of the first and then the sign attached to your factors that you've circled. Okay? All right, last one, ladies and gentlemen. Can we common factor out? No, a is 1, so that's a key to remember that we can't common factor here. So we're going to take a look at our product and sum. It's a trinomial. So product is going to equal negative 63, and our sum equals negative 2. Folks, you should note that if your product is negative, that means you must have one negative and one positive. Those are my short forms. Okay, and if we know we have one negative, one positive, we take a look at the sum. And if the sum is negative, that means the biggest number must be negative. So I'm going to go 1 times negative 63. Then I'm going to go 3 times negative 21, and 7 times negative 9. Again, for your upcoming quiz and unit test, folks, please, or 5A unit test, you've got to make sure you've increased your speed in terms of coming up with these factors. Okay, so please make sure you know how to do them quickly. All right, folks, we got the product of negative 63 in 3 cases, but which one sums to negative 2? It is the 7 times negative 9. So as we learned last class, you take the square root of the first, and you take the sign of the factors you just found out. All right. There's your warm-up, folks. If you're stuck on that, please go ahead and do some more of these trinomial factoring questions before you attempt doing decomposition. We will start today's lesson on decomposition with giving us the example that we did last day, but I want you to write down trinomial factoring, a does not equal 1. And we're going to either do one method, which is where we can common factor if possible, and the second method, which is called decomposition. All right. Let's get started. Recall simple trinomial factoring. So if a equals 1, like this example here, a is 1, then we can take a look at the product being negative 30 and the sum equaling 1. So if the product is negative, that means we must have one negative and one positive. If the sum is positive, that means our biggest numbers have to be positive. So I'm going to go negative 1 times 30, negative 2 times 15, negative 3 times 10, and negative 5 times 6. Got all my factors there that give me a product of negative 30, and only one of them will have a sum of 1, which is negative 5 times 6. So to factor this, you would take your two brackets, take the square root of the first, and take the signs attached to the factors. All right. Question now, folks, and this is why we're focusing on today. What happens when a does not equal 1? We must use another method to solve. Try the first method, which is called common factoring first, because you may end up with a simple trinomial factor left over inside the brackets. So here's our method 1. And no matter what type of factoring you're doing, folks, you always want to common factor first. And what we want is we want a, meaning not but a, the value of a, to equal 1 inside the bracket. Once we've done that, then you continue with last day's lesson, which is simple trinomial factoring. So if you didn't master last day's lesson, let's see if we can get that figured out right now. So taking a look at example A, first of all, notice that the letter value for a is 3. Okay, we want it to get 1. So can we common factor a 3 out of every value or every term? Yes. So we're going to put the 3 out front and factor through. So it's going to be, or divide through, do a common factoring. So it'd be f squared plus 4f plus 3. Okay, check inside your bracket. Can you do any more factoring? Well, hey, this is a trinomial factor. And now know that a now equals 1, which is great. So that means we can go product equals c, which is 3. And my sum equals b, which in this case is 4. What are the only factors, folks, that get you to 3? 1 times 3. And do they sum to 4? Absolutely. So the only difference here, folks, is you got to leave the 3 out front. Then you set up your two brackets, take the square root of the first term, just like last day, okay? And then you're going to bring your signs in. of your factors. All right, let's try another one. Taking a look at B here, folks, I noticed something different about my expression. Instead of it being in standard form, I got d to the third, d squared, and d. So d is common to all, so I can take a d out, and I can also take an a out, a 2 out. So we're going to have a common factor out front of 2d, okay? And when we divide each term by 2d, or common factor out of 2d, we're going to have d squared minus 7d minus 18. Okay, look now in our bracket, folks, and again we've got a equaling 1. That's great. So we're going to do our product and sum to find our two factors. So our product is negative 18. Our sum equals negative 7. If our product is negative, that means both, we need to have one negative and one positive. Excuse me, I've got to sneeze. Okay. Excuse me, sorry about that. That was a long time waiting. Ah, there, I feel better now. Okay, so a positive times a negative for the product, guys. Okay, and if if the sum is negative, that means the biggest number has to be negative. So I'm going to go 1 times negative 18, 2 times negative 9, and 3 times negative 6. So remember, folks, those all have a product of negative 18, but which one has a sum of negative 7? It's the 2 times negative 9. So what we need to do, folks, is put your common factor out front, and then set up your simple trinomial factoring, where you take the square root of the first, and you take the signs of the factors that we found in our margin. Signs and the factors. Okay, so method 1 is much easier. If you can get it to simple trinomial factoring by doing a common factor out front, that is great. If not, you've got to do the hardest type of factoring that we do in grade 10, and it's called decomposition. And that is where a does not equal 1, and you can't get a to equal 1. So it says here, if we tried to common factoring and a still does not equal is not equal to 1, then we must use the decomposition method. All right. They're going to find out in this bracket, in this box here, when we do decomposition, there's going to be some things that are similar, but some things that are a little different. So to factor an expression in the form ax squared, where a does not equal 1, we must find two numbers where the product is a times c. If you think back to last day's lesson, folks, a was always 1. So 1 times c was c. So that's why we just said the product was c. In all cases of trinomial factoring, folks, the product is a times c. And the sum equals b. So that's the same. Okay? What we're going to do, though, is when we find our two possible factors, okay? When we find our two possible factors, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to split or decompose the middle term into two terms. So you end up with 4, instead of a trinomial, we're going to have 4 terms. Okay? Then we're going to common factor the first two and the last two, and you'll factor out a common binomial, which you'll have seen before. All right, before you get all frustrated, just follow an example with me. Okay, and some steps are the same, and the only thing that's different really is 4 and 5. Okay, all right. So taking a look at example A, it says factor the following. First of all, check the common factor. I know A is 2. Can we factor 2 out of every term? No. So we can't common factor. So we know we've got decomposition. When we're doing decomposition, product equals A times C. I'm going to put that down for a couple times till I get it. So it's going to be 2, which is this value here, times C, which is this 2 here. So 2 and 2 equal 4. So my product equals 4, and your sum stays the same, which is plus 5. Okay? So now we need to figure out, I'm just going to move this up a little bit so hopefully we can still see the steps. Great. Now we need to figure out what are our products of 4, 1 times 4 and 2 times 2, and which one sums to 5, 1 times 4. So that's almost the same except for this product is A times C. Okay? But what we're going to do with those factors is different. Okay, what we're going to do is actually split the middle term into those two terms. So we're going to leave the first term as it is, folks. So leave 2x squared as it is. And instead of writing 5x, I'm going to write down plus 1x plus 4x. And then I'm going to write my last term down, which is plus 2. Notice now I have 4 terms. And if you take a look, folks, 1x plus 4x equals 5x. So I keep the equation balanced. It's exactly the same. I just need to split it into split the middle term into 2. Okay, so that was number 4. Now what we're going to do is number 5. And it says common factor of the first two terms. So what do we see common in the first two terms, folks? I see an x, and what's left over is 2x plus 1. Then I look to say, hey, what's common in my last two terms? And it's a 2, so it's a positive 2. And what's left over is 2x plus 1. From here on in, you should recognize that we've already done this type of factoring. So look, ladies and gentlemen, at our brackets. Our binomial is common, so that becomes our common binomial. It comes out front, 2x plus 1, times the other bracket, which is x plus 2. Those are your leftovers. Okay, so notice, folks, when we do decomposition, it's going to be different in that at least one of the x's has to have a coefficient greater than 1. Okay, so that's why you have to do decomposition. That's why you have to split it into 4 parts in order to find out that coefficient in front of the variable. All right, so to check, ladies and gentlemen, same as what we did before. You take your answer, which is 2x plus 1 times x plus 2, and you're going to FOIL it out. Okay, so it's going to be 2x squared plus 4x plus 1x plus 2. Notice, folks, those are the two terms. Haha, this is exactly what we had here, right? You had to figure out those two terms. Collect like terms, so we got 2x squared plus 5x plus 2. Does it get back to the original question? Absolutely. All right, let's try it again. Okay. Taking a look at example B. Try to common factor first. Can we common factor out any values? Yes, you can factor out a 2. So I'm going to factor out a 2. So I'm going to be left with 3m squared plus 5m plus 2. So you say, hey, we common factored, but rats, we still have an a that's not equal 1 in the bracket. So since a does not equal 1, therefore decomp. And you might want to get in the habit of writing that out or something so you recognize, hey, I've got to do decomposition. So off in the margin, here we go. Product equals a times c. So that's going to equal 3 times 2, and you use the ones that are in the simplified bracket, guys, not your initial ones. No, don't use those. Okay? I'm just going to erase them so you know not to use them. Okay? So what we need to do, folks, is a times c, which is 3 times 2, which is 6. So we got a product of 6 and a sum of 5. So what are our two numbers that multiply to 6? 1 times 6 and 2 times 3, which when sums to 5 is the 2 and 3. So again, we're going to split the middle term, but this is a little different. You got a common factor out front. So I'm just going to give me a big square bracket because eventually I'm going to need to put other brackets in here. Okay? And I'm just going to write it a little smaller, guys, because I need to have a little bit more room here. Okay? Okay, so I'm going to go 3m squared. Then we're going to split the middle term into plus 2m plus 3m and plus 2. All right. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I leave the 2 out front. That's why you need these big brackets. Now I'm going to say, hey, what's common in the first two terms? I see an m. So what's left over is 3m plus 1. And taking a look at, 3m plus 2, my fault. And taking a look at my last set of bracket, my last two, I can't factor anything out. So you have to write down the only thing that you could factor through is a plus 1. Because one can be taken out of both terms. Okay, and don't forget your closing bracket that matches. All right, we're almost done, folks. So we need the 2 out front. Our common binomial is 3m plus 2, and your leftovers is m plus 1. So to check this, ladies and gentlemen, you start with your answer, careful here, folks, in your method. You want to probably do the FOIL first. Okay, so leave the 2 out front. So it's going to be first, which is 3m squared, outside, which is plus 3m, inside, which is plus 2m, and last, which is plus 2. Collect like terms inside the bracket, so 3m squared plus 5m plus 2, and distributive law, the last one out, so 6m squared plus 10m plus 4. Do we get back to original question? Yes. If you didn't, you would go back and try to figure it out. All right. I think, ladies and gentlemen, in the interest of time, we will delete E and F, because you'll have lots of practice to do this in tonight's, or when you do your homework. So we'll just do 2 more, and then I've got one little blurb, and we'll be done. So thank you for staying with me. Let's take a look for C. Can we common factor anything out? No, but A does not equal 1, therefore decomp. Okay, you might want to get into the habit of writing that out. Product equals A times C, so 5 times 8. Okay, so the product is going to equal 40. Everybody good with that? Okay, sum equals negative 14. For sum is negative, but our product is positive, that means both need to be negative. So you have negative 1 times negative 40, negative 2 times negative 20, negative 4 times negative 10, and negative 5 times negative 8. Which one of those adds up to negative 14? That's that one. So we write out the first term, split the middle term, so I'm going to go minus 4p and minus 10p plus 8. Okay, take a look at what's in the first 2 terms, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to try to do this all in one color. Okay, so what's common in the first 2 terms is a p. What's left over is 5p minus 4. What's common in the second terms, okay, we have a 2. But folks, if we want to have the same common binomial, I'm going to have to take out a negative 2. So taking out a negative 2 is going to leave me with 5p minus 4. Take a look at that one, because, folks, if you had negative 5p plus 4, the common binomials wouldn't work. So that's why you need to take out a negative 2. Okay, because you want the binomials to be the same. So you end up with 5p minus 4 times p minus 2. Again, you notice with decomposition that you have at least a coefficient that's greater than 1 on one of your values. All right, last one, and then we'll write a little blurb. Okay, taking a look here, folks. Can we common factor anything out? No, we can't. So we're left with product. A does not equal 1, therefore decomp. So product equals 8 times negative 3, which is negative 24. Sum equals 10. If our product is negative, that means we need 1 negative, 1 positive. If our sum is positive, that means the biggest number has to be positive. So it's going to be negative 1 times 24. Negative 2 times 12. Negative 3 times 8. And negative 4 times 6. Which one of those sums up to 10? It's the negative 2 and 12. Okay. So taking a look at this, ladies and gentlemen, we've got 8b squared. Split the middle term into negative 2b and plus 12b and minus 3. Put your last term in. What's common in the first 2 terms, ladies and gentlemen? Hopefully you see that you have a 2b common, so you're left with 4b minus 1. Okay, be careful there. It's minus 1. It's not minus 0. Okay, what's common in the last 2 terms? I'm going to take out a 3, so I'll be left with 4b minus 1. And so we've got our common binomial of 4b minus 1 times our leftovers 2b plus 3. Now, ladies and gentlemen, please don't write this down, but I want to show you another way of doing this. It's the same way, but if you put it in a different order. It depends on how you put the middle 2 terms in. Okay? Don't need to write this down, but just watch so that if you're doing this with a friend and they start getting a different answer, it's okay. So I'm going to put my first term down. I'm just going to put that in a reverse order. I'm going to go plus 12b minus 2b minus 3. Okay, so I just split the middle, I just changed the order. So instead of doing the negative one first, I did the positive one first. Okay, watch what happens here, folks. Okay, what's common in the first two terms? Now I have a 4b. What's left over? 2b minus, 2b plus 3. Everybody good with that? What's common in the last term? Last two terms, a negative 1. So we have a 2b plus 3. Watch that. With a negative and a negative make a positive. And your common binomial this time is the opposite here. Did you notice that, guys? So it's 2b plus 3 times 4b minus 1. Same answer, ladies and gentlemen, just depends on which order you put them in first, okay? So notice the answer is exactly the same because a times b is the same as b times a. Just wanted you to be aware of that if you are talking to someone, they're doing it a little differently. All right, taking a look here, and this is important to know because we did a lot of examples here the last couple of days about being factored. And I want you to realize, folks, that very few algebraic expressions in standard form are factorable. Okay, so taking a look at this example, folks, okay, looking at this, we can common factor out. Yeah, we can common factor out a 2. So we're left with 2v squared plus 3v plus 3. Okay, looks like, hey, we got decomposition in the bracket, so product equals a times c, which is 2 times 3, which is 6. Okay, and our sum equals 3. Well, our only possibility to get a product of 6 is 1 times 6 and 2 times 3. Does any of those have a sum of 3? No, so then you would say no further factoring. Okay, and you're going to say, oh great, Miss R, what do we do if we can't? Well, later on, okay, in this chapter, we're going to learn how to use this, and we're going to use what's called the quadratic formula. I'm just going to show it to you so you're not scared, but so you recognize it. It's the longest formula you're going to see in grade 10 math, and you use it in grade 11. Ready? X equals, ready, here we go, negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. You're going to say, Miss Art, that is crazy. Don't worry about it, folks. You already know what the a, the b, and the c is. So, for example, we know the a in the original question here is 4, b is 6, c is 6. You just sub it in. All right? And this will give you decimal answers where you couldn't factor before. Okay, but we will get to that after we do 5A unit test. We'll be getting to this in the 5B unit test. So this gives you the decimal answers that we won't get when we do regular factoring. All right, folks, thanks for hanging out with me and sticking through that. Again, next lesson will be difference of squares. It'll be your easiest factoring. So this is the hardest stuff, folks. So please take your time. Make sure you're getting your homework done, which is right here. Factoring handout numbers 2 to 8, A, C, and E for all. And please come and see me if you need any help. And have a great day.